a resident of Capell Valley, Calif, runs a bulldozer in the hills above the valley floor. Napa, Calif, late Tuesday night, as a raging Atlas fire bore down on the small Capell Valley community of a few dozen homes in the hills above the city of Napa. Cathy Pridmores' goats began giving birth. It wasn't a convenient time, she said. Her family, multiple generations of Pridmores ranging from nieces and nephews to brothers, cousins and grandparents, were in the hills above her home fighting a fire that was threatening the land their family has called home since 1927. The Pridmores, who make up a substantial amount of the households in the valley, were embattled with the blaze alongside a ragtag crew of neighbors and friends who had stayed behind to save the valley that they call home. Tuesday night would prove to be their toughest fight. Swirling gusts of wind had whipped 100-foot flames into a semicircle around the valley. The Pridmores and their neighbors used bulldozers and water tenders from Gil Pridmore's construction company, Pridmore Brothers Construction, to cut fire lines and douse homes in water. And as the fire encircled the valley and the residents of Capell Valley cut fire line after fire line, Cathy helped bring 21 baby goats into a world that was, at the time, a raging inferno. Cathy Pridmore said she's going to name some of the feistier baby goats Fire, Smoke and Ember. The Pridmores and their neighbors were successful in beating back the flames, not just on Tuesday night but for days after. Their efforts, alongside teams of firefighters, saved all but one home in the valley. The story of the Capell Valley community is one that was repeated in neighborhoods and valleys across Northern California's wine country this week, as dry conditions and high winds fueled multiple fires in Sonoma, Napa, Yuba and Mendocino counties. It was not only firefighters who stood in the path of the blazes, but civilians too. Contractors, skilled construction workers and even former wildland firefighters came out of the woodwork to run bulldozers and drive multi-thousand-gallon water tenders on twisty and damaged back roads. They picked up what tools and equipment they could and tried to save their neighborhoods. By the end of the week, thousands of firefighters from across the nation had converged on the area to fight the flames. But when fires roared across suburban and rural portions of wine country late Sunday night, local firefighting resources were quickly spread thin. That first night, it quickly became apparent to the residents of Capell Valley that they were going to be on their own. When evacuation orders were given for the area, many residents chose to leave, but the Pridmores and many of their neighbors chose to stay. They knew if they left, there would be little standing between their homes and the raging Atlas fire. Honestly, at that point I think we had more resources available in the area to fight fire than Cal Fire did, said Cameron Pridmore, Cathy's son, who's a civil engineer. Now thousands of firefighting resources have been diverted into Northern California, but the scope of the blazes burning in the state has been overwhelming. The Pridmores and their neighbors weren't on their own for long. A handful of firefighting crews arrived in the valley shortly after Sunday. Air support in the form of tanker planes and helicopters doused the rim of the valley when winds were calm enough for them to fly. When those crews arrived, the people of Capell Valley fed them and supplied fuel for their trucks, while the Pridmores and their neighbors fought to save their homes. Entire neighborhoods and swaths of rural area were being charred and reduced to rubble. At least 40 people have died in the flames and officials estimate that roughly 5,700 structures have burned so far. Diane and Bob Rosecrans, who live in the Capell Valley, were celebrating their anniversary in Oregon when the Atlas fire sparked. They rushed down the coast as quickly as they could, but the drive took hours longer due to roadblocks from other fires further north in California. It wasn't after they arrived home on Monday that the evacuation order was given. They've been holed up in a hotel in Napa since, getting updates from their neighbors fighting the fire back home. A week later, their home is still standing. They credit the work of their neighbors for that. We're not at all surprised that these people did what they did, Diane Rosecrans said. Not at all. Days after the fires started, word of the past week's destruction is slowly reaching the Capell Valley. Power went out shortly after the fires started, taking cell service with it. Until Tuesday we didn't really have communication with anyone, Cathy Pridmores said. It was mayhem when the fires first started coming over. The Pridmores and their neighbors didn't have radios, a normally crucial tool, so Cathy Pridmore and his cousins used dirt bikes to relay messages between different groups and keep tabs on the fire's movements. This wasn't the first time Gil Pridmore had fought a fire in those hills. He spent years as the boss of the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection bulldozer crew and fought the 1981 Atlas Peak fire. He used this experience to help lead a team of 30 people to cut multiple layers of fire lines on the rim of the valley, when flames would breach their lines and encroach on houses. The goal was to get the house in the black, or completely surrounded by burned areas so there was no fuel left to catch fire. The worst part was waiting, because you'd see it coming, Cathy Pridmore said. Then after a while you just wanted it to be over. One way or the other. We either win and we save the house, or we lose and the house is gone. Either way, it's over. Saturday night was the first time the Capell Valley took a breath since the Atlas fire first barreled across the mountainsides nearly a week before. Plumes from the Atlas fire could be seen in the distance, but fire activity in the valley was low. Many homes in the valley were being partially powered by generators, but freezers storing reserves of meat had begun to thaw and risked going bad. So residents took the meat to a barren field they'd chosen as their safety spot and communal meeting place and had a cookout. People cried and people hugged. We even had a glass of wine, Cathy Pridmore said. Follow Sam Gross on Twitter, @SamsGrouse.